Hello, and welcome to the prologue of Super Mario Mayhem. In this video, I'll be discussing the history of Nintendo, their start in video games, and how the original Donkey Kong was conceived. It all started in 1889 in Kyoto, Japan. A man named Fusajiro Yamauchi founded a card manufacturing company called Yamauchi Nintendo, with the initial purpose of manufacturing Japanese playing cards known as Hanafuda. Throughout the early 20th century, Nintendo was exclusively known for their Hanafuda cards, but around 1965, their focus started shifting towards producing toys after they hired the late Gunpei Yokoi, who will become a prolific figure in Nintendo's history. Nintendo started producing interesting toys and gadgets for the Japanese market, including the Ultra Machine, a baseball pitching machine, the Love Tester, a device intended to tell how much love was between a couple, and the Ultra Hand, one of Nintendo's most popular toys. In the early 70s, Nintendo started to dabble into the emerging video game scene, when they first helped create a light gun peripheral for the Magnavox Odyssey in 1972. Soon, in 1977, Nintendo released their first home video game console, the Color TV Game 6. It was essentially a variant of a dedicated home Pong console that was extremely common during the 1970s, but contained 6 variants of the Pong game. Around the same time, Nintendo had also begun producing video arcade games with their release of Computer Othello based on the board game of the same name. Over time, Nintendo continued to release arcade games, most of which were derivatives of other popular arcade games at the time, including Space Fever, Monkey Magic, Hellfire, and the most original of the initial games, Sheriff. Fast forward to 1980, the arcade scene was rising at an incredible rate. Numerous arcade games were released during this year, such as Missile Command, Crazy Climber, and more importantly, Pac-Man, or Puckman as it was initially known in Japan. Nintendo during this time had begun releasing their Game & Watch LCD handheld series, as well as one game that is very influential to our story. The game was Radar Scope, released in October of 1980 in Japan. The game itself was another vertical fixed space shooter that was common during the time, where the player is tasked to destroy an entire fleet of aliens who swarm the player every now and then. The game was heavily based on Namco's Galaxian, as it follows a similar gameplay loop of eliminating an enemy fleet, with some of the enemies falling to take you down occasionally. Ultimately, Radar Scope never took off like its space shooter predecessors, and was a complete commercial failure. It was reported that only 1,000 of the 3,000 units produced were ever sold, leaving about 2/3 of the units unsold and untouched in Nintendo's warehouse. This failure had left Nintendo in a financial crisis, and they needed a new game quickly to convert the unsold units into. This is where a very important figure in our story comes into play. Shigeru Miyamoto, who was hired by Nintendo in 1977, was tasked to design a new game. Initially, his idea was to have a game revolving a love triangle similar to Popeye, Bluto, and Olive Oil, and although Nintendo did try to get the rights to use the Popeye characters, they were initially denied during the game's conception. Instead, Miyamoto went with the carpenter saving a woman from an evil gorilla, with the gorilla taking inspiration from King Kong, and thus, the characters of Donkey Kong, Lady, and Mario were created. In this first game though, Mario went by Jumpman, who was later named Mario after the landlord of Nintendo's warehouse, Mario Segale. After designing the game, Nintendo would release Donkey Kong to arcades on July 9th, 1981 in Japan, and July 31st, 1981 in North America. And the rest is history. Join me next time as I play the game for myself and begin my journey to see the Mario franchise evolve, game by game. See you next time.